Secondly, the studying of inheritance of two pairs or more of contrasting traits. Actually, along this experiment, Mendel studied the inheritance of two pairs or more of the contrasting traits between the two types of pea plants. And let's now study the steps of Mendel's experiment. Number one, he conducted a mixed pollination between two pea plants, one with pure tall stem and red flowers, while the second with pure short stem and white flowers. Then he planted the produced seeds. Mendel observed that all the first generation plants had tall stem and red flowers, which means that all the plants that produced from the first generation carry dominant trait with a ratio 100%. Here is the genotype of the dominant trait or dominant traits and the recessive ones. Actually, as you know, each trait is represented by two genes. So if we choose T to be the symbol for the gene which represents the length of the stem, either it's tall or short, and R to be a symbol for the gene which represents the color of the flower, either it's red or white. So to write the trait of tall stem in the form of genes, the genes which represent a tall stem trait will be written T capital, as long as this trait is pure dominant 1. As long as the red flower trait is pure dominant 1 as well, the symbol of the genes of such a trait will be written in the form R capital, while the genes of the recessive traits will be written T small, R small, and as you know, the recessive trait must be pure. Gametes contain half of the number of the genes that the parent cell contains. So, if any trait is represented inside the parent cell using two genes, so inside the gamete, the trait is represented by only one gene. So, the genotype of gametes will be T capital, R capital, or T small, R small. Then, these gametes are gathered to produce individuals of the first generation. And as you can see, 100% of the plants which are growing in the first generation are of the dominant traits, tall stem and red flowers. Mendel left the first generation plants to self-pollinate. Then he planted the produced seeds, waiting for the second generation plants. And he observed. Here, Mendel observed that the pairs of dominant traits and those of recessive traits that were inherited together from the first generation got separated in the second generation, and each trait of them made a new mixture of traits that weren't exist before. For example, we saw in the second generation plants having tall stem and red flower, while others having tall stem and white flowers, others with short stem and red flowers, while other plants having short stem and white flowers. But all those types of plants eventually give the same ratio of dominant traits to recessive traits, which is 3 dominant to 1 recessive. So, Mendel's second law says, or the law of independent assortment of hereditary factors says, when two pure different individuals pairing two pairs or more of alternative or contrasting traits are crossed, the trait of each pair is inherited independently of the others and appears in the second generation at a ratio of 3 dominant traits to 1 recessive trait. Here we have a problem to illustrate Mendel's second law. In such a problem, the opposite figure shows the inheritance of two traits, the shape and the color of seeds in pea plant. And as you can see from the genotype and phenotype of the produced plants and the plants that we use We have two types of pea plants. Pea plant of smooth and yellow seeds, and another pea plant with wrinkled and green seeds. Those two plants crossed to produce individuals of the first generation, and as you can see, all the individuals of the first generation having the dominant trait and the dominant trait only appeared in the individuals of the first generation, which is pea plant of smooth and yellow seeds. Then, when we leave these plants to make self-pollination, the second generation appeared, and these individuals of second generation appear as following genotypes. Some of them are yellow seeds or plants with yellow seeds and smooth seeds, others with yellow seeds but their seeds are wrinkled, others having green seeds and smooth as well, but others having green seeds but the seeds are wrinkled. The ratio of dominant traits that appeared in the second generation to the recessive trait which appear also in the second generation were 3 dominant traits to 1 recessive trait. Dominant trait: the shape of smooth seeds, the color of yellow seeds. Recessive traits: shape of wrinkled seeds, color of green seeds. Genetic structure of gametes of individuals of the first generation will be A capital, B capital, A capital, B small, A capital, B small, A small, B small. Traits of individuals of the first generation will be all the individuals of the first generation will be of smooth and yellow seeds with 100%, but the recessive trait appears in the second generation with a ratio 9 yellow for each 9 plants with yellow seed and smooth seeds. We will have 3 wrinkled and yellow seeds plants, 3 smooth and green seeds plants to 1 wrinkled and green seeds plant. Now we have another problem to illustrate Mendel's second law, but I will leave the answer of such a problem to you to find what are the genotypes and phenotypes of the individuals which are produced from the first generation and the second generation of such crossed plants. Now, scientists found that the individuals that inherit at least one dominant gene from one of their parents will have the dominant trait, but those who receive a recessive gene from both parents will have the recessive trait. Here are some of the dominant traits and recessive traits of the human being. The ability to roll the tongue is one of the dominant traits that we can see in some persons, while the inability to roll the tongue is the recessive trait. The separated loops of the ears, separated ear loops, is a dominant trait, while connected ear loops is a recessive trait. From the other recessive traits and dominant traits that the persons or the human being that may have, wide eyes is one of the dominant traits, while narrow eyes is one of the recessive traits. Curly hair is one of the dominant traits, while straight hair is one of the recessive traits. Presence of dimples or absence of dimples are both traits that make the persons are so recognizable. So, presence of dimples is one of the dominant traits, while the absence of dimples is one of the recessive traits. Face without freckles. Freckles means they are spots which appear all over the skin, which may sometimes have a recognizable or a recognized color other than the other color of the skin. These freckles, if they are so it's considered to be one of the recessive traits that may the human being have. And the absence of the freckles is the dominant trait. The trait of brown eyes is a dominant trait, while the colored eyes is a recessive trait. If I ask you, give a reason for the ability of rolling the tongue is from the dominant traits in the human being, the answer will be because the gene of the ability to roll the tongue dominates over the gene of the inability to roll the tongue. So they both present in an individual, but the dominant trait only will appear on such individual. Now, we will study the chemical structure of nucleic acid, the nucleic acid which is the DNA inside your body. As you studied in the first term that the nucleus contains chromosomes. Each chromosome chemically consists of nucleic acid, DNA, combined with protein. DNA carries the hereditary or the genetic traits of the living organism. What are the genes which are important to express the hereditary traits inside your body? Genes are parts of the DNA present on the chromosomes, and they are responsible for appearing the individual's hereditary traits. The scientists Watson and Crick were able to make a model for the DNA molecule. How do the genes perform their functions? Actually, we have a summary for the function of any gene inside your body. We can summarize the mechanism of any gene as follows. First, any gene inside your body gives an enzyme. Such enzyme responsible for undergoing definite chemical reaction. This chemical reaction resulting a protein, and due to such a protein, the gene takes the ability to allow the trait to appear on your body. For example, the inheritance of both brown eyes colors trait and the trait of black hair color, which are dominant traits. That occurs as follows. When a person inherits from his parents the gene responsible for the appearance of the trait, such as the brown eyes or black hair trait, so this gene gives an enzyme which makes a definite reaction, result in a definite protein that works on the appearance of the trait, either it's the brown eyes color or black hair color. Thanks for listening and hoping you make a good use of what you have studied through this lesson.